When I was in high school, I'd spend each summer working in my uncle's motel. I know, not the best place for a teenager to work. Just to clarify, the motel wasn't my first choice. It happened that the places I'd applied to didn't want someone with no experience. For days, I tried to find a summer job. I was about to give up when I saw the help wanted sign on my uncle's motel. With no other options, I applied there. My job was to clean the motel. I'll admit there were times when I wanted to quit, but I wasn't going to let some nasty messes scare me away. My story began the summer before senior year. My uncle started having me work the evening shifts. The reason was that another guy who worked those shifts quit. This will be relevant to the story, so keep it in mind. One evening, I was asked to clean the outdoor pool. I was making my way to the pool when I heard noises from one of the rooms. There was glass breaking and two people screaming. This wasn't uncommon, as couples usually fought in the motel. As usual, I went to get my uncle. When I told him which room the couple was in, my uncle's response surprised me. "Oh, that's just the Bogworths," my uncle said. "Give them a few minutes and everything will settle down." He'd usually get angry and intervene in the fights, but for some reason, he was willing to leave this matter be. I assumed that the Bogworths were regular guests with marital problems. When I passed by the room again, it was quiet. Remembering what my uncle said, I shrugged it off and went to clean the pool. By my next shift, I'd already forgotten about the weird incident. About a week passed, and the same thing happened every day at the same time. I never saw the Bogworths in person. What's more, I didn't find anything broken in their room. In fact, the whole place looked as if it was vacant the whole time. This was weird because I was the only person assigned to clean that room. I don't think I'd ever learn the truth had it not been for that one day. That day, I came to work in a bad mood. My dad was nagging me over something trivial an hour before my shift. I was still irritated by it when I passed by the Bogworths Room. As per usual, they had their screaming match. I was so fed up that I decided to give the couple a piece of my mind. I unlocked their door and barged into the room. My anger immediately vanished when I saw what was inside. Two people were standing in the middle of the room, but something was wrong with them. Both of their heads were missing. Their clothes and room were covered in blood. The screaming stopped and both bodies turned to me. I stood there frozen, unable to process what I was witnessing. Two hands then suddenly grabbed me from behind and pulled me back. The next thing I saw was my uncle slamming the door shut. My uncle asked me if I was okay. I couldn't answer due to the shock. My uncle saw this and took me to his office to recuperate. When I finally calmed down, I told him what had happened. I thought my uncle would yell at me for not listening to him, but instead, he hugged me while apologizing. My uncle then told me the truth about the Bogworths Room. Years ago, a man named Jared Bogworth rented a room in my uncle's motel. At the time, my uncle was the motel's receptionist. Jared wanted a room for one night. According to my uncle, Jared seemed a little paranoid. His initial thought was that the man was on something. Of course, my uncle didn't want someone like that in the motel, but he didn't want to risk getting in trouble with his boss. My uncle reluctantly gave Jared a room key. A few hours after Jared's arrival, loud screams enacted from his room. My uncle called 911 when he realized whose room it was. As I mentioned before, the motel gets noisy visitors all the time. But what prompted my uncle to call for help was that he heard two voices coming from Jared's room. My uncle's voice shook as he recalled the horrible incident. When the police and ambulance arrived, they were met with a gruesome sight. Jared was found decapitated in his room. The window was broken and there were bloody footprints everywhere. The police suspected that the killer had entered and exited through the window. However, the footprints didn't appear to be heading toward the window. Exactly 24 hours after the incident, the same screams were heard from the same room. A staff member was cleaning the room at the time and ran out of there. When asked what was going on, he made a disturbing claim. The staff member said that two headless figures appeared out of nowhere and started yelling at each other. One was male and the other was female. The female entity was holding a meat cleaver in her hand. Someone must have called the authorities because they arrived a few minutes later. But when the police entered the room this time, they found nothing. No blood, no headless bodies, nothing. The staff member happened to be the same one who quit. The hauntings repeated daily. It happened so often that the police eventually stopped responding to those complaints. Later, my uncle heard on the news that Jared's wife, Cynthia, was found in their house's basement. Lying nearby was a bloody axe, bloody clothes, and Cynthia's head. The autopsy confirmed that Cynthia died the day Jared came to the motel. After examining the clothes and axe, it was confirmed that Jared was the killer. My uncle started putting the pieces together and got an idea of what had happened. Cynthia's ghost must have done to Jared what he did to her. As a result, the headless couple was in limbo, having to repeat that night over and over again. It seemed that Cynthia wanted Jared to suffer for what he'd done to her. My uncle stopped making me work in the evenings for the rest of the summer. Looking back, I understand why the former employee wanted to leave. Despite everything, my uncle's motel is still in business. I guess it will take more than two headless spirits to ruin the place.